Let's kick off our broadcast with the country recording a new record high in single-day infections since the start of the pandemic. Tonight's big number is 17,231. That is the number of new COVID-19 cases reported over the past 24 hours. This surpasses the previous record of 15,310 cases set in April this year. The new tally also beats projections that caseload will reach 16,000 a day by next week. The country's total COVID infections is now at more than 1.8 million, 123,000 of which are still active. That's a 4-month record. The Philippines also logged its highest positivity rate today, 26% of samples testing positive. Good evening, I'm Robbie Alampay. You're watching The Big Story. Even as COVID infections are posting new highs, Metro Manila and 2 other provinces will be downgraded to modified ECQ after 2 weeks under ECQ. Starting tomorrow, the capital region and Laguna will be under MECQ until the end of the month. The province of Bataan will have their shift to MECQ once the current quarantine status lapses on the 22nd. Meanwhile, unified curfew hours will still be imposed over Metro Manila. That's from 8 p.m. to 4 a.m. Keep in mind that indoor and outdoor dine-in services are still prohibited. Same goes for salons, spas, and barber shops. Indoor and outdoor sports facilities and gyms are also not allowed. No physical religious gatherings allowed as well, except for necrological services involving only immediate family members. Metro Manila's shift to MECQ remains taxing for small business owners as most of them still have to close up shop during the period. Mounting losses since the ECQ have compelled some of them to operate illegally. Shaila Francisco with a big story.
Sherry was greeted with unpaid bills when she visited her salon. She doesn't know how she will be able to pay them, especially that personal care services will remain closed during the modified ECQ period. She says that some salons have resorted to illegal operations just to survive.
Hindi mo masisisi kasi wala namang ibang source of income kundi paggugupit, pagmamanicure.
Restaurant owners and workers are also bending over backwards to survive as alfresco dining and dine-in services are still prohibited. Janice, a restaurant worker, says she has lost more than 4,000 pesos since the start of the ECQ.
Kaya nga, lumalaban na lang po kami kahit paano para maitaguyod na rin namin yung pang-araw-araw po namin
Salons and food businesses are among the worst hit industries during ECQ, along with those involving hotel services, construction, and manufacturing.
The Labor Department says more than 1,600 establishments have been affected due to ECQ as of August 15. This translates to about 62,000 workers displaced. But the numbers could increase as Metro Manila will be placed under MECQ until the end of the month.
Of this number, more than 550 have closed permanently, while others have temporarily shut down or have resorted to a flexible work arrangement. These figures have yet to include workers in the informal sector.
Pwede po na siguro maging arrangement or agreement between the workers and the employers na kung meron namang mga part-time work na pwede po yung mga workers nila po pwede naman nilang payagan until such time that they can really say that.
Workers like Sherry and Janice are appealing to the government to give them more time to settle their bills and rent. To somehow ease their burden, Metro Manila Council Chairman Edwin Olivares said in an interview with Radio 5 that the IATF is studying the proposal to allow establishments to accept fully vaccinated customers. Shaila Francisco, We Are One News.
How could the shift to MECQ affect the country's health sector, especially as cases continue to rise? To answer that, we have with us Dr. Ana Ong Lim, member of the DOH Technical Advisory Group. Good evening, Dr. Ong Lim.
Good evening, Robbie.
Let's start with what's on the minds of many Filipinos. Tumaas ang numbers, nagulantang sa 17,000 plus. This on the day or the day after we receive word that we're going back to MECQ. It really seems very ironic, counterintuitive. How are you looking at this?
Well, it's certainly very concerning. Maybe for a little bit of a perspective, the discussions were made were done a few days ago. And of course, these numbers were not yet on the table. But even then, I think one of the things we have to keep in mind is these numbers are a reflection of what happened 2 weeks ago. This was
Yes.
precisely why we closed down. We were expecting these numbers to come up. So the actions that happened or the result of the 2-week ECQ is something that we will be seeing 2 weeks down the line. There is always a lag time that we have to consider.
Yeah,
I think one of the big differences that we're seeing with respect to the numbers is that even as there is a higher demand for hospital services, comparatively, no, in contrast to what we experienced in March or April, there are fewer ICU admissions. And it seems that the healthcare capacity is faring up a little bit better this time around. Of course, without minimizing the demands on capacity, it's still quite substantial.
Okay.
So I think we have to keep a really close watch to see where these numbers go. And the team meets quite regularly to assess. And hopefully, if there's any indication that there's a need for tighter quarantine, I'm sure this will be discussed.
Doctora, given the 2-week delay in assessing, I mean, as you said, this is actually a snapshot of what happened 2 weeks ago. We've been on a 2-week lockdown. Does that actually mean we still don't actually know if the 2-week ECQ, what the impact of that was?
Well, there are projections, and the reason why the ECQ was implemented in the first place is that we expect the numbers to go down. But we all have to admit that this ECQ is actually not what we expected. I think I personally, I didn't expect this much movement to be happening, because what I had in mind was an ECQ that was similar to what we experienced last year. No? And that's simply not happening anymore. So I think one of the things we have to also think about is how do we achieve the limit in mobility that ECQs are supposed to achieve to be effective.
Okay. Maraming salamat po, Dr. Ana Onglin, member of the DOH Technical Advisory Group. And these are the other big stories tonight. It's not only Metro Manila, Cebu City is also seeing a surge in infections. Deaths in the Queen City of the South have risen almost 14 times in just 3 months. With 86 million pesos in claims yet to be paid, the state insurer PhilHealth halts the payment of claims to hospitals allegedly involved in corruption. And in less than 48 hours, boxing champ Manny Pacquiao returns to the ring. His camp is confident that they can send Ugas to the canvas. These big stories after the break. Good evening. You're still watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay. The Cebu City LGU is making do with steel racks to store bodies of those who died of COVID-19. Their crematoriums are now being overwhelmed after fatalities saw a huge spike in just 3 months. Jenny Dongon has the story.
This group of men are in a hurry to finish 2 dozens of steel rocks on Friday as ordered by the Cebu City LGU. But these are not your ordinary shelves, as remains of COVID-19 victims will be placed here. They will be stored in a trailer-sized freezer reportedly lent to the LGU by a concerned citizen. This huge freezer can keep at least 25 bodies, a huge help while there are no spaces in the city's crematoriums. Cebu City crematoriums remain overwhelmed amid the uptick in the number of bodies for cremation. One funeral home even stored cadavers in a chest freezer for food.
Siguro every 15 minutes or 10 minutes, we receive a call inquiring about cremation. Grabe ho, ma'am. Then di lang ho kasi namin kaya, we can only accommodate up to 7 bodies a day. So, first come, first serve tayo eh.
This has prompted the LGU to look for spaces in cemeteries that could serve as burial grounds. But cemeteries in the city are also crumbling to accommodate remains of COVID-19 victims. Only 14 COVID-19 deaths were recorded in June 2021. It then rose to 87 in July and to 202 in just the first 19 days of August, translating to at least 8 daily deaths.
As early as June, talagang ina-assume na namin na nandito na talaga si Del. We might have the best contact tracing in the country, but it was really suffocating on our part.
Despite the threat of COVID-19 and the highly infectious Delta variant, the city remains under the last, stricter MECQ. For News 5, Jenny Dongon, we are One News.
Time to take a look at the COVID situation around the country. Cash aid distribution resumed in Barangay San Antonio, San Pedro, Laguna today. Rollout was halted yesterday after beneficiaries flocked to the venue due to false news that payouts have a cutoff. Authorities say 2 women from Muntinlupa allegedly spread this information. Back in the metro, at least 25 mothers, 2 children, and a newborn baby tested positive for COVID-19 at the Fabella Hospital in Manila and now admitted at the hospital's isolation facility. The hospital says most of the mothers have mild cases of COVID-19. The children are asymptomatic. Meanwhile, 6 Delta variant cases were recorded in Santa Cruz, Marinduque. Governor Presbitero Velasco Jr. said one of them already succumbed to the disease. Velasco suspects that the variant may have spread to other areas in the province as their total cases rose from 300 in May to almost 1,300 this week. COVID-19 vaccine makers are now limiting their supply deals, scrapping the option for LGUs and the private sector to purchase through tripartite agreements. Mobile journalist Jacob Lazaro gives us a front seat to the story.
The COVID-19 vaccine orders put in by local government units and private sector have hit another roadblock. Vaccine czar Carlito Galvez Jr. announced earlier this week that Moderna and AstraZeneca are no longer accepting vaccine orders through what's known as a multi-party agreement or tripartite deals. Meanwhile, Sinovac, Pfizer, and Sputnik will be prioritizing orders from the national government given supply constraints. And Johnson & Johnson's vaccine is currently not available through MPAs. Senator Juan Miguel Zubiri has called out for a Senate inquiry into the matter, pointing out that some 10 million doses are in limbo.
These are 42 pending local government tripartite agreements, and about 200 agreements waiting in line as well for the private sector. When I spoke to representatives of these vaccine manufacturers, they said, hindi po, we have supply, especially the later part of this year. However, there are no signed contracts, so we cannot act on this supply.
The worry is that supply will get tighter soon. The U.S., against the World Health Organization's request, has decided to go ahead and give out booster shots to its citizens beginning next month.
They're already getting their 3rd shot, and a lot of the low and middle income countries haven't even gotten their 1st shot.
Herbosa also says it may be best to leave vaccine procurement to the national government and that LGUs should instead focus on boosting testing and contact tracing.
So huwag na kayong makipag-compete kasi dadagdag pa kayo doon sa competition ng supply.
Majority of the orders the LGUs and private sector initially wanted to put in were from either AstraZeneca or Moderna vaccines. So far, only 2 tripartite agreements have been approved, and neither of those have been fully delivered. I'm Jacob Lazaro, and we are One News.
PhilHealth has temporarily suspended the payment of claims to hospitals allegedly involved in unethical practices. In a circular, PhilHealth said the temporary suspension will ensure that funds released by government are correct and will not be wasted. PhilHealth adds this is not a penalty for hospitals, but just a preventive measure. A hospital group, however, is calling it sweeping and arbitrary. They're saying they were surprised by the move, especially considering that the agency still has more than 86 billion pesos in unpaid hospital claims.
Nagtataka kami kasi nag-usap naman kami last week or a few days ago. At sinasabi nila na inaano nila itong itong mga possible reimbursement sa amin. Ay bakit ngayon naglalabas sila ng ganyan? Na para bang may konti kayong problema. Sorry, hindi kayo babayaran.
Marvel's final trailer for Eternals is already here. Academy Award-winning director Chloe Zhao is at the helm of the project. In it, an Eternal said they arrived on Earth 7,000 years ago to protect humans from their evil counterparts, the Deviants. The trailer also addresses why they did not interfere with Thanos' plans.
Instructed not to interfere in any human conflicts unless deviants are involved.
There also appears to be a much larger threat at hand, the Celestials. These cosmic beings first appeared in Guardians of the Galaxy. The trailer also has its light-hearted moments.
You know what's never saved the planet? Your sarcasm.
And what's this even made of? Vibranium?
Fall collection.
Eternals is slated for a theatrical release November 5. Nick Garcia, We Are One News.
Time for another quick break. When we return, as protests spread in Kabul after the Taliban takeover, some Filipinos, especially members of the LGBT plus community, are continuing to fear for their lives. And the 2-year wait is over. Boxing champ Manny Pacquiao is set to make his ring comeback on Sunday, and the odds seem to be in his favor. The details after the break. Good evening. You're still watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay. The Taliban called on Afghanistan's imams to urge unity when they hold their first Friday prayers since the Islamist group seized control of the country. This comes on the back of protests spreading. In Kabul, crowds waved the national flags as they marched on the Day of Independence from British control. Chaotic scenes, meanwhile, continue in and around Kabul airport as gunmen fired into the air at several entrances. They scattered crowds, including women clutching babies. It was not clear if the men firing were Taliban or security staff helping U.S. forces inside the airport. A NATO official reported that more than 18,000 have been flown out of Kabul since the takeover. Filipino members of the LGBT plus community in Afghanistan are fearing for their lives as the country falls back into the hands of the Taliban. One of them, Mara Carino, a transgender woman who luckily got out of Kabul in a crowded U.S. cargo plane. Jay Orense tells us her struggle to escape.
These are the images at the Kabul International Airport in the last few days. Heart-wrenching and gut-punching. Afghan people desperately scaling the walls of the airport to secure a space in the parked planes. Even foreigners are scrambling to flee Afghanistan. But Mara Carino, a Filipina, was lucky enough to secure a flight.
US.
The warning she received came from friends who are working in different security agencies, not from her British employers who abandoned her days leading to the fall of Kabul.
Tapos nung Saturday ng morning, yung kaibigan ko from US Embassy kasi mga Pilipino, sabi nila sa akin, Mara, magpa-flight na kami ng 10 o'clock ng gabi. So natakot ako kasi US Embassy na nagsabi. Tapos sabi nung friend ko na si Grace Malor, kayo nga HR manager, yung director HR manager ng camp ng Heart Security, itry kong kausapin si boss ko kung pwede kang isali.
She has been working in Afghanistan for the last 16 years, and being a trans woman puts her life in danger if she stays a minute longer.
Sa lahat ng bansa, alam natin, bawal po ang mga kagaya ko sa mga Muslim country. Yung mga 3 years ko siguro dito, natatakot ako. Pero kasi pag boss mo kasi is mga national, mga international, accept ka nila eh.
But now that the Taliban is in control, she has no choice but to flee. Huddled together inside an armored vehicle, they slither their way into the tension-filled streets of the capital. But just before they reach the gate of the US Embassy,
natrap kami sa daan ng Taliban. So pumunta kami sa gate po ng US Embassy. Doon po kami pinasakay ng ng chopper po papuntang H. Kaya. Hindi na may open yung gate ng embassy kasi nandun na yung mga naka-alert na yung mga Taliban doon sa gate. Mga tao na kasi nagkagulo na sir eh. Mga luggage namin naiwan sa daan. I-secure mo lang yung passport mo.
they were taken by a chopper to Kabul's International Airport, where the U.S. Air Force's C-130 is waiting for them. As they boarded the plane, she fears for her other Filipino friends who are still trapped in their places.
Wala po silang visa, kaya nakakatakot lang kasi ang sabi sa akin ng friend ko doon na hindi na siya nakakatulog kasi kinakatok sila ng Taliban sa every room. Tapos yung isa kong friend doon, LGBT part din siya. Pero hindi kagaya ko, siya yung parang gay lang siya. Pero ako kinakabahan.
For now, they are temporarily being sheltered at the U.S. Embassy in Doha, Qatar, as they wait for the Philippine Embassy's assistance. Reporting for News 5, Jay Orense, We Are One News.
For the big story in sports, the highly anticipated return of Manny Pacquiao in the boxing ring is just 2 days away at age 42. Senator Pacquiao is still the clear favorite to win the fight, but his opponent may have something to say about that. Din Olivario has the story.
After a 2-year hiatus, Manny Pacquiao is set to hit the ring once again. This time, he will face Cuban boxer Yordenis Ugas. For Pacquiao, this is about reclaiming his WBA super welterweight belt, which he won over Keith Thurman in 2019. He was stripped off the belt for inactivity.
It's not good for me to strip my belt without fighting me, without challenging me. So let's see if he will get the belt.
Betting odds now favor Pacquiao, but had his bout with his original opponent Errol Spence Jr. pushed through, he would have been considered an underdog. But even at 42, Manny says he's feeling young.
I think for the Thurman fight, on my everyday training, I did 25 rounds, 28 rounds a day, but this time I did 30 rounds, 32 rounds, sometimes 31 rounds. So, and the coaching staff trying to stop me because I want to do more.
Pacman added that he was able to adjust in 2 days his training for a southpaw boxer in Errol Spence Jr. to an orthodox fighter in Yordenis Ugas.
It's good for me because I used to fight right-handed most of my career, so nothing to worry about.
Hall of Fame trainer Freddie Roach is confident that Manny will send Ugas to the canvas. After all, the People's Champ knocked out his sparring partner in his training camp last week.
He's trained really hard for this fight. Putting the one sparring partner on the canvas was a motivator for all of us.
But the 2008 Olympics bronze medalist believes otherwise.
I'm 100% certain he cannot knock me out. I've really been, hitting my stride, and I don't think Manny Pacquiao can knock me out.
Although aware that he is the underdog, Ugas is more than ready to slug it out for what he considers to be the most important fight of his life. For News 5, Lynn Olivario, We Are One News.
stay home and stay tuned this Sunday for the much-awaited bout of the Philippines fighting pride Manny Pacquiao and Cuban Olympic boxer Yordenis Ugas. You can catch their fight for the world welterweight title on Signal pay-per-view for only 750 pesos, live, commercial-free, and in HD. For postpaid subscribers, go to my.signal.tv and order online. For Signal prepaid and satellite subscribers, visit your nearest smart load retailer and load PPV 750. Don't miss this fight, Pacquiao versus Ugas on Signal pay-per-view for 750 pesos. Order now. Manny Pacquiao's comeback is also seeing the open beta launch of his exclusive Android mobile game. Gamers may soon download Fighting Pride, the Manny Pacquiao saga, developed by Ranida Games and OMG Incorporated. Fighting Pride depicts the life of people's champ from days of poverty to the boxing legend that he is today. The open beta version will feature story and online player versus player modes. It will offer more than 65 stages, over 3 chapters of Pac-Man's life. Players may train their character and then use moves such as Manila Ice, Pinoy Pride, and Sarangani Punch. And that wraps up today's big story. Catch us again on Monday, 8 p.m. on Signal Channels 8 and 250. Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, visit our webpage, onenews.ph. Mask on, wash hands, stay safe, Philippines. Sa ngalan po ni Gretchen Ho, I'm Robbie Alampay. Good evening.